Roman soldiers were trained to face death without fear. They marched into impossible battles, charged into walls of arrows, fought hand-to-hand against overwhelming enemies. But there was one fate that terrified them more than dying itself: capture. Because across the frontiers of the Roman world, horrifying stories spread from one legion to another. Stories of soldiers dragged away in chains, tortured for entertainment, sold into slavery, publicly humiliated by barbarian tribes that hated Rome with a burning passion. Some Roman soldiers reportedly chose suicide before allowing themselves to be taken alive. And as the empire began collapsing, that fear would slowly poison the Roman army from within. Imagine standing in formation as the battle collapses around you. Your shield arm exhausted, your commander dead somewhere in the chaos. Screams echoing through smoke while barbarian warriors break through Roman lines. In that moment, Roman soldiers were not only afraid of dying, they were afraid of surviving. Because survival sometimes meant becoming a prisoner. And prisoners often disappeared into nightmares far worse than the battlefield itself. If you enjoy dark historical documentaries like this, subscribe now, because what happened to captured Roman soldiers is one of the most terrifying parts of ancient history. Roman military culture was built entirely around honor, discipline, obedience, strength. Roman soldiers were taught that surrender brought shame not only upon themselves, but upon their families, their commanders, and even Rome itself. Defeat was humiliating. Capture was worse. Entire legions carried deep psychological trauma from disasters where thousands of Roman soldiers vanished into enemy hands. One of the most infamous examples came after the catastrophic Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, when Hannibal annihilated massive Roman armies. Tens of thousands of Romans died, but many were captured alive. And what followed haunted Rome for generations. Captured Roman soldiers often became tools of psychological warfare. Enemies understood the power Rome projected across the world. Destroying Roman morale became just as important as killing Roman troops. Some prisoners were marched naked through enemy settlements as trophies. Others were starved, beaten, or forced into slavery. In certain cases, captured soldiers were mutilated and released deliberately so survivors would carry terror back to Roman lines. Imagine seeing fellow legionaries return missing fingers, eyes, or limbs, broken physically and mentally. Those men became living warnings. Rome was no longer invincible. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of capture was uncertainty. Roman soldiers never knew what fate awaited them. Some barbarian tribes enslaved prisoners for life. Others sacrificed captives during religious rituals. Some forced Roman prisoners to fight one another for entertainment. Ancient accounts describe captives dying slowly from disease, starvation, exhaustion, and abuse. And deep within the Roman military, horrifying rumors spread constantly. Stories became darker with every retelling. Soldiers whispered about prisoners skinned alive, burned alive, buried alive. Whether every story was true no longer mattered. Fear itself became a weapon. Then came the Germanic tribes along Rome's northern frontiers. Unlike Rome's structured military machine, many barbarian warriors fought with terrifying unpredictability. Their attacks were sudden, violent, emotional, and brutal. Roman soldiers feared not only defeat, but what came after defeat. Barbarian victories often unleashed pure chaos. Camps were burned. Survivors hunted through forests. Prisoners dragged away screaming into the wilderness. Imagine being a Roman soldier lost in a dark forest after battle, hearing barbarian horns echoing somewhere beyond the trees, knowing capture meant entering a world where Roman law no longer existed. And the psychological pressure only intensified as the empire weakened. In earlier centuries, Roman soldiers believed the empire would rescue them eventually. Rome was powerful enough to negotiate ransoms, launch rescue campaigns, or retaliate against enemies. But by the late empire, that confidence vanished. Soldiers increasingly realized that if they were captured, nobody might come for them. Entire regions of the empire were collapsing under invasions, corruption, and civil war. Loyalty disappeared. Supplies became unreliable. Armies grew weaker, and fear spread faster than Rome could control it. This fear began changing Roman behavior in battle itself. Soldiers fought harder when surrounded because they believed death was preferable to capture. Others panicked earlier, desperate to escape before enemy lines closed around them. Some abandoned formations entirely once battles turned against Rome. Discipline, once the foundation of Roman military dominance, slowly eroded under constant psychological pressure. Fear infected entire armies, and Rome's enemies understood exactly how to exploit it. One of the darkest examples came during the empire's later conflicts against Gothic invasions. Roman armies increasingly faced enemies who had witnessed decades of Roman brutality themselves. These tribes hated Rome. Entire barbarian communities carried generational anger after years of conquest, taxation, massacres, and exploitation. Captured Roman soldiers often became symbols of revenge. Imagine a terrified young legionary realizing the men surrounding him had spent their entire lives hearing stories about Roman cruelty. In that moment, surrender no longer felt like mercy. It felt like entering hell alive. And then came the emotional collapse. As defeats mounted across the empire, horrifying stories spread through military camps faster than official orders ever could. Soldiers whispered about entire units disappearing after ambushes. Survivors described screams coming from barbarian camps at night. Some claimed prisoners begged for death. Others described Roman captives forced to watch executions of fellow soldiers before meeting the same fate themselves. Fear became contagious, and once fear spreads through an army, collapse is never far behind. The terrifying truth is that Rome did not collapse only because of invasions or weak emperors. It also collapsed psychologically. Roman soldiers slowly stopped believing they controlled their own fate. And once that confidence disappeared, panic became deadly. Armies that once conquered continents now feared encirclement, isolation, and capture more than battle itself. The psychological terror surrounding captivity slowly poisoned morale across the empire. Rome's enemies no longer needed to destroy every legion physically. Sometimes fear alone was enough. But perhaps the most haunting part of all this is how human it feels even today. Strip away the armor, the banners, and the ancient world, and the fear remains recognizable. The fear of helplessness, the fear of humiliation, the fear of losing control over your own fate. Roman soldiers were not only afraid of pain, they were afraid of becoming powerless in the hands of people who hated them. And in the collapsing final centuries of the empire, that fear became one of Rome's greatest enemies. If this story fascinated you, subscribe for more dark cinematic documentaries about ancient Rome, brutal warfare, collapsing empires, and the terrifying realities hidden behind history. Because the deeper you look into the ancient world, the darker it becomes.